Good evening, everybody. Today is July 6th, 2020. This is a regular Moscow City Council meeting. It is 7 o'clock. Gina?
Good evening, everyone. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Gina, and welcome, everybody. We have the room organized so that social distancing is proper, so everybody that is sitting out there can take off a mask if they wish. And we do have some folks sitting side by side, husband and wife, and that is just fine. As we go through the evening meeting this evening, if you decide during whatever appropriate time it is to speak, we will ask that you wear a mask when you come up to the podium, however. So as we go along, and everybody's going to get a chance to visit here with us a little bit, but we're going to start with agenda item number 1, which is approval of our Moscow City Council meeting minutes of June 15th, 2020.
Your Honor, I move that we approve the minutes of June 15, 2020.
I will second. Okay.
Okay, was that Maureen that got the second?
Sandra, I believe.
Sandra.
I don't know.
Okay. You guys will have to help me. Okay, we've got a motion by Gina and a second by Sandra to approve the Moscow City Council regular minute meetings on Monday, June 15th, 2020. I'll start the roll with you, Brandy.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
And Ann. No voice on you, Ann. Okay, well, we'll move on. Okay, item number 2, staff recognition report. Gary Reedner, do you have anything for us this evening, sir?
Nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Okay, item number 3, mayor's appointments. I have 9 of them this evening for the council's consideration. I'll run through them. Joe Ellen Forrest, Fair and Affordable Housing Commission, expiration 12/31/2022. Steve Taylor, Historic Preservation Commission, expiration 12/31/2021. Laura Beth Landis, Historic Preservation Commission, expires 12/31/2021. Becca Miller McPhee, Human Rights Commission, expiration 12/31/2022. David Pixley, Human Rights Commission, expiration 12/31/2020. Sonia Ford, Moscow Arts Commission, expiration 12/31/2020. Aaron Bacon, Transportation Commission, expiration 12/31/2020. Randy Bacall, Transportation Commission, expiration 12/31/2024. Jeannie Leffingwell, Tree Commission, expiration 12/31/2021. And I would entertain a motion from council on this.
I move approval of all those commissioners and welcome them aboard.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Brandy and a second by Gina to approve the slate of 9 new commission members. I will start the roll with you, Maureen.
Aye.
Anna, are you on now? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sandra.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Sandra.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
And Brandy.
Aye.
Okay, by chance, are any of you folks one of these individuals? Please stand up. Okay, none of them are here tonight. What I always like to talk about when we have folks that spend time and hours of dedication being on our various commissions throughout this city, we highly respect myself as the mayor as well as this council because it takes time and effort. And we've got a lot of great people on various commissions throughout our whole town, which we thank them for. And with that being said, and of course, for any of you that is out in the audience, there's always ways, if you're interested in being on commissions, to get a hold of us through our city website and do that, because we're always looking for new ideas and lots of talented folks, so thank you. With that, I'll move on to item number 4. Item number 4 is our public comment period, and how this works, it's a mayor's response period where I limit it to 15 minutes, as I will any of the action items that I have on tonight's council meeting. So if you'd like to come up and state your name and what you're all about, as long as it's not something on this evening's agenda and/or something in front of planning and zoning and/or board of adjustments. But like I did say, we will have time for action items as we go along through tonight's agenda. So with that,
Your Honor, if I may, as well, if you're, when you're done testifying, if you would take one of those wipes out of that canister and wipe down the podium, that would help us with good hygiene practices.
Okay, Victoria Seaver, 121 North Lily, Moscow. I think I'm legitimate here. It's pretty impressive when there's a sign that goes up that just says thank you, and we all know what it's about. Somebody will go to a burning car and pull somebody out of there without a lot of concern about risking their lives to do that. And some people work in a hospital or an ICU unit during a pandemic, knowing full well that some of them are going to get sick in the process. Some businesses will, by their own volition, choose to cut back or close to protect their employees and customers. And some people, even in hard times, will do what they can to help support them and support their families out there. These are everyday heroes. Some people, and they might think it's foolhardy, might even go to a skunk or a bear and pull a plastic container off their head and hope they don't get a thank you. And but they're there to help, and some people will wear a mask even if they think it's silly and unnecessary, but they'll go ahead and do it. Some people will take a piece of fabric and turn it into a political hullabaloo versus helping a kid with asthma, or maybe their dad has diabetes, and exposing them to a pandemic several people down the chain. Go figure. I don't get it. So for my part, I was happy to see a picture in the paper of a sign and a big old petition and a whole lot of letters of support in terms of the mask mandate. And I want to say ditto. Thank you, Mayor Lambert.
thank you, Victoria.
My phone doesn't recognize my face.
Your name, sir?
Gabriel Wrench, Moscow, Idaho. Make sure I take this out so I don't forget. So the whole COVID craze, actually, let me back up here real quick. First, I want to thank the council and the mayor for your service and additional burden you have been carrying during these last months. And I especially want to thank Brandy and Gina in all this. They've been consistent and willing to communicate, debate, and honest, good faith discussions. Really appreciate both Brandy and Gina. This whole COVID craze is about the data, and at the same time, it's not about the data. Back on March 25th, when the council passed the original resolution to shut down our local economy, I was provided some data by members of the council modeling the shutdown, modeling reasons for the shutdown. But now that the modeling has come out demonstrating that anywhere from 10 times to 80 times the number of people have already contracted the COVID, which massively drives down the mortality rate, that would even mark some demographic death rates far below the flu, well, this modeling is being rejected and not even considered by the council. The whole COVID craze is about the data, and at the same time, it's not about the data. Back on February 29th, the United States Surgeon General said, and to quote him, "Seriously, people, stop buying masks. They are not effective in preventing general public from catching the coronavirus, but if healthcare providers can get them to care for the sick patients, it puts them and their communities at risk." That's by the Surgeon General. The whole COVID craze is about the data, and at the same time, it's not about the data. When the mayor and the council voted to shut down the economy back on March 25th, you dictated to our restaurants and our local businesses that they had to stop making money to provide for their families, their employees, and livelihoods. All the while, you walked home with your mandated taxpayer paychecks. You required something out of local businesses that you had no interest in subjecting your own livelihoods to. You created a standard for others that you, as city officials, were not willing to subject your own taxpayer-funded paycheck to. The whole COVID craze is about science, and at the same time, it's not about science. At the same day,
Gabe, you've got 1 minute left.
thank you. The same day, Mayor Lambert signed a resolution requiring face masks based off the data or science. He also chided New St. Andrews College for a video that depicted a male student walking into a male public bathroom and a female student walking into a female public bathroom. This public bathroom included male and female signage in multiple locations, and this public bathroom was built under Mayor Lambert's watch. But somehow Mayor Lambert is anti-hate and New St. Andrews is not. You see, this council really does not care about the data, nor about centuries of science, of old science. You prefer to voice your opinion when the rage culture gives you permission, and you prefer to lead when you know the only pushback you will get will come from the Christian community who does not vandalize local businesses nor dox communities we disagree with. If you've seen the business list going around doxing businesses connected to my church. You're glad to speak out about New St. Andrews, but you will not speak out about literally Nazi toxic tactics
You're all
doxing my
done.
businesses.
Gabe, go over and sit down, please.
My name's Zach. I'm a student at the University of Idaho, and I'm also a cook at one of the local restaurants that's closed down because of coronavirus. I still have my job there. I'm one of the lucky few, but our owner has decided that it's probably a good idea to open up this week, on Wednesday actually. And I know all the students are coming back to the university after summer, and we're planning to have in-person classes, and I feel like my safety isn't really being taken into account, and the safety of the community. And I want to know, are we planning to quarantine again? Are we planning a stay-at-home order? What are we planning to do? I mean, 3 restaurants have shut down. Are we going to wait till it's like 5, 10? Like, how many? I'd just like to ask that question to the council. Thank you.
That's an easy one for me to answer, Zach. I mean, these restaurants, the only ones that are closed are ones that have had to because they've had infections that have generated from their establishments. We have not closed any of them down. Some have closed down voluntarily on their own. The universities have got protocols in place for what they're going to be doing this fall. And so the best thing for all of us to be able to do is just like what you're doing yourself and wearing a mask today. We do that, we keep things in order, and it's an easy thing to do. So with that, Zach, thank you.
Your Honor, if I may, Chief Fry just indicated that there are some people outside would like to come in and speak, but they can't because the size of the room won't allow social distancing. So just wanted to ask if anybody is done with their talk, if they would leave and allow someone else to come in. That's certainly your choice.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, this is Lori. Can I get Zach's last name for the minutes?
He's
Bishop.
Bishop.
Thank you.
Can I make one comment? I just want to respond to Zach when he's up there, and I wanted to be able to say that the University of Idaho has actually hired someone who his job is to look at the COVID-19 and what they're going to do on it, and I encourage him to contact the University of Idaho and contact that person.
Okay.
Okay. I'm medically exempt, but I will be wearing this if it pleases you. I am Benedetta Tony Salerno. I am a sovereign being under God, and I do not consent to this mandated mask wearing. As a business owner of Palouse Juice in health and wellness, I would like to see this community promote health to stand against viruses via nutrition, supplements, exercise, sunshine, faith support, etc. I fear that masks will give us a false sense of security, and with breathing less oxygen, we will be recycling toxins, recycling bacteria, humidity, mold, etc. We will in fact suppress our immune systems and set our bodies up for failure if we come into contact with any future viruses in the fall. A century ago, British scientists suggested a link between increased hygiene, masks, sanitizers, and distancing as to a weakened immune system and being improperly trained. Dr. Lemon of Denver, Colorado fears our overprotection may hinder us. The fact is, she states our immune system can become disrupted if it does not have regular interactions with the natural world. Our immune system needs a job to do, and we evolved over millions of years to have our immune systems under constant assault. Now they have nothing to do, and my fear is that it could breed a community of high-risk, compromised immune systems in our community. Any doctor will tell you our greatest defense is our immune system, and by being exposed to germs and bacteria, we will in fact strengthen ourselves, providing that we are promoting the essential supporting elements of sunshine, nutrients, exercise, etc. If masks were so effective in combating the virus, then how come one of the highest outbreaks where they wear that religiously was in China? Didn't they all have a huge outbreak? Perhaps it stands to reason that with the promotion of masks, it is in fact negligent for you to not also admit the potential risks. Here are just a few. Number 1, increased toxin and bacteria inhalation. 2, hinders and shuts down the immune system functions because of the increased cortisol due to stress over increased CO2. Increases virus risk because it encourages a triggered response of dormant retroviruses waiting for a weakened immune system to attack us. Wearing masks is scientifically inaccurate because of the size of the particle versus the mask fabric itself. Why does the box of masks itself have a disclaimer of it not being protected against COVID and only being allowed for a single use? I stand by health and wealth, and I would like to see a community strong enough to withstand any virus or germ on the market. I cannot emphasize enough that our greatest defense is our immune system. Thank you for your time. I'm passionate about health. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Come on up. We have enough time for one more.
I have a medical exemption.
Your
This
name,
is-
ma'am? What is your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Jennifer Wisniewski, Moscow, Idaho. This is according to New England Journal of Medicine, dated May 21st, 2020. We know that wearing a mask outside health care facilities offers little, if any, protection from infection. Public health authorities define a significant exposure to COVID-19 as face-to-face contact within 6 feet with a patient with symptomatic COVID-19 that is sustained for at least a few minutes, and some say more than 10 minutes or even 30 minutes. The chance of catching COVID-19 from passing interaction in a public space is therefore minimal. In many cases, the desire for widespread masking is a reflexive reaction to anxiety over the pandemic. And this is Article DOI 10.1056/NEJMP 2006372.
Thank you. Your name, sir?
Hello, Counselor. I am Zach Baird. I am a local business owner here on Main Street, and husband to Benedetta. All right. Thank you guys for the opportunity to speak today. I appreciate it. With all due respect, Mayor and Council, I would like to express my concerns in reference to your emergency mask ordinance. As a business owner and a father in this community, first of all, Main Street's had enough. We've had, from this economic impact with the schools and student populace being gone, right? The weekend comedy festivals, the Mom's Weekend, festivals and other events being canceled, we've suffered greatly down here on Main Street. We have complied with the curbside and delivery ordinance, working our way through the stages of opening. I'm proud to say to our community, we've all banded together to get through this, barely scraping by with 15 to 25% of sales during the curbside and delivery. Today, our business climate consists of bullying from certain council members. I'm not going to mention their name today. Coming into our businesses with slogans such as, "A city that masks together stays together." And I just respectfully want to just announce that and just let them know that that's not very professional. And I'm all for protecting our local citizens as well. But also, I just want to let them know that that is very unprofessional. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. That ends our public comment period. So we're going to be moving on to the next thing, which is, and before I get into item number 5, what I'm going to talk about here for a minute is what we've been trying to do, and by doing this order, hopefully what it'll do is keep our businesses open. I'm not going to be a person that's going to be shutting things down, but if something breaks out somewhere, the health department could clearly do that, as well as our state authority. So if we work well enough on this together, and I mean that together, we'll get through this thing. And by the way, folks, this is temporary. It's not a forever thing. With that, we're going to move on to item number 5, Gary, resolution of extended amended public health emergency order 20-03. Gary, you have got the podium, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. What the council has before it today is a resolution, a draft resolution for the council to extend the public health emergency order that was issued by Mayor Lambert on June 30th and then amended on July 1st. If you look in the resolution as well as the emergency orders, there is constitutional authority for doing so. Idaho Constitution Article 12, Section 2, to enforce within the city limits all such local police, sanitary, and other regulations or is not in conflict with the city's charter or with the general laws of the state. Secondly, Idaho Code 50-302 enables cities to promote the general welfare of its citizens. Idaho Code 5304 grants cities the authority to prevent the introduction of contagious diseases into the city and to make quarantine laws for that purpose. And Moscow City Code Title I, Chapter 11 is the Moscow City Code that allows the council and the mayor to preserve the health and safety of the public. The mayor in that ordinance is granted emergency powers to issue public health emergency orders, which he did in this case. Reason for the order was that there has been a sharp spike in increase of COVID-19 confirmed cases. After having 8 cases in Latah County for quite a while, on June 30th, there were 16 confirmed cases, 5 probable cases of COVID-19, according to the North Central Health District. On June 30th, that same day, there were 121 confirmed and probable cases of COVID-19 within District 2. Governor Little indicated both in his press conferences as well as his telephone calls to conference calls to local government that he was delegating to local government the ability to enter orders. And if I can quote, recommended practices to, excuse me, that's not a quote, not mandating statewide face coverings or physical distancing for non-household members, and is trusting and encouraging local officials to take any measures they deem necessary and appropriate to protect their community. Afterwards, the CDC, the federal government, the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, and Idaho North Central Health District have recommended 2 practices to battle the infection or contagious infection, which is social distancing of 6 feet or more, and face masks or facial coverings when those social distances cannot be maintained. If you look in the emergency order, there is children who are 5 years of age or older are directed to wear facial coverings. That was, we looked around at other jurisdictions that had implemented orders, and the state of Washington, which of course is on our western border, was one of the first to come out with mandating facial coverings. And they chose 5 years old because of the, that's when kids typically go to kindergarten and mix in with other children. If you look at the CDC recommendations, they recommend children 2 years of age and older should be wearing facial coverings. That was not something that appeared that the mayor wanted to do. So with that, under Idaho Code and under our ordinances, the mayor has the ability to issue a emergency proclamation or emergency order. That order will be in place for 7 days, at which time it will expire unless it is extended by order of the city council. So the resolution that you have before you today, similar to the emergency, public health emergency order that was issued in March, goes through 2 separate council meetings. It will, if the council decides to enact and approve the resolution, that it will be in effect until midnight on August 4th. That spans 2 separate council meetings. If the council desires to, at either the July 20th or the August 3rd council meeting, can choose to terminate the order or modify it, extend it, or otherwise at that time. So that is what is before you today. Certainly answer any questions if you have them.
Questions for Gary from council. It's going to be my intention, this is not a public hearing, however, it is an action item that we're going to take, and I'm going to allow a testimony for 15 minutes. 3 minutes, no more than 3 minutes per person, but before we get into that, does anybody have questions for Gary before I ask for that?
I do have one question.
Sandra.
Gary, when we talk about face masks, I think it would be really easy to, I'm wondering what kind of face mask? Do we have a regulation on what kind? Can it be lacy? Can it be fishnet? Can it be a face shield? Does it have to be a cloth? It has to be so much in diameter? I mean, I've had people ask me, what are the stipulations for a face mask? And I don't know the answer to that.
As Governor Little likes to say that, you know, a good dose of Idaho common sense would dictate that a face mask should be something that will actually stop you, particles from coming out of your mouth when you exhale or cough. However, we have also looked at that. That issue came up this afternoon. We do have some proposed language if the council decides that it wants to define face masks. There are many different types and lots of different materials. Of course, those who have a medical exemption or they are unable because of physical, mental, or otherwise complications are exempted from wearing a face mask at any rate. So again, it's up to the council. If the council would like to take a look at that, certainly we have the draft or resolution for you.
Okay, Gary, with that, let's go ahead. It is 7:27 right now, and I'll leave this open for 15 minutes. If somebody wants to come up, you've got 3 minutes. State your name. And if you spoke before, we've heard you the first time, so go ahead. State your name, sir.
Gabriel Wrench, Moscow, Idaho. A couple things. One is in the Idaho statutes that Governor Little's been operating under and all this, in Section 56, he defines quarantine. It actually defines quarantine and isolation. You can quarantine specific locations and you can isolate the sick. What we've done is we flipped that on upside down and we quarantine everywhere and we've isolated everyone. Secondly, in Idaho, there's been no deaths under 50 years and younger, and the death rate for 80% and above has been 70 years and older. Lastly, if I disobey mayor's orders here, and then I go to jail, I don't have to wear a face mask anymore. I don't think you guys are seriously dealing with the problem.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Abigail Smith, and I live on 6th Street here in Idaho. Over the past several months, we've suddenly found ourselves fighting a new and unknown enemy. COVID-19 has taken its place at the center of our global conversation and our personal interactions, and it has affected every aspect of our lives and done so in record time. Perhaps now would be a good time to consider how the principles of just war theory, since we're battling COVID, might offer some perspective as we move forward. So there are 2 primary things to think about. First is discrimination, and the second is proportionality. In waging war, this is under discrimination. In waging war, it's considered unfair and unjust to attack indiscriminately. In his book, Just and Unjust Wars, Michael Walzer explains that the onus is on the government to identify the combatants, and so the implication goes, if there is any uncertainty involved, then an attack must not be made. Applying this principle to our COVID battle, it is not right to force those who are not identified as COVID positive to wear a mask. If there's any uncertainty, the requirement must not be made, otherwise we're not being appropriately discriminate. Thus, to require everyone to wear a mask is a blatantly indiscriminate move. It's not within the normal purview of the government. The problem with the universal mask policy is just that, it's universal. It does not differentiate and is therefore fundamentally unjust. And anecdotally, as a friend of mine recently said, it's not even that effective. Her friend, a young, smart, fierce, incredibly talented fashion designer, has contracted this horrible virus. She's been super careful the entire time, masking, only going out of the house for necessities, and in short, she did everything right, and she's still sick. All right, now for the second principle, proportionality. In order to fight a just war, the desired end should be proportional to the means used. So what we do in battling COVID cannot be worse than the enemy that we're seeking to defeat. Regardless of our feeling about masks, we all share the same end. We all want COVID to be contained and defeated. But at what cost? Masks serve to further increase our social distance by removing our ability to visibly watch another person's expressions and facial movements, and this is having a damaging effect. According to an April 10th article published by the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, secondary consequences of social distancing may increase the risk of suicide. It's important to consider changes in a variety of economic, psychosocial, and health-associated risk factors. The article goes on to cite a host of disturbing social consequences to our disproportionate response to COVID, including economic stress, social isolation, decreased access to community and religious support, barriers to mental health treatment, other illnesses and medical problems going unattended, outcomes of national anxiety, the list goes on and on. Why is that? And here's my main point. Because these masks rob us of our fundamental humanity. The long-term damage of our social restrictions at a time when our nation's already so polarized and divided is grossly disproportionate to the virus's toll, particularly here in Latah County. We've had 26, I think this was right, 26 positive cases, no deaths. The beauty of proportionality is that it enables a nation to temper war's violence and range.
Dr. Smith, could you wrap it up, please?
I'm sorry?
Your time is about up. Could you wrap it up, please?
Oh, yes. I think my biggest concern is that what ends up happening is it makes our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers, our acquaintances, our family, even when we're masked, people that we're afraid of. And it's not each other that we should be afraid of. It's COVID and its subsequent outcomes that we should fear. Thank you.
Thank you. That's enough, folks. Yes, sir. Your name?
John Wisniewski, Moscow, Idaho.
John,
Bullying.
pardon me, John what?
Wisniewski,
Okay.
Moscow, Idaho. Bullying. I could not wear a mask. I could not when you asked. I have an illness from long ago that affects the oxygen in my blood flow. But now you've made a new mandate, and with that, encourage others to berate. With raised voices and scowling eyes, because I don't wear your disguise. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, from long ago and from afar. Many fought, and now they're dead, but those old ways have raised their head. But I need not to wear this symbol, for you have made it very simple. Look for the ones without the masks, and there you'll find your next task. Because of what you've done, I'm now a second-class citizen, and I've been treated as such in public.
My name is Jennifer Wisniewski, Moscow, Idaho. This is from JAMA, March 4th, 2020. When should a mask be used? Face masks should be used only by individuals who have symptoms of respiratory infections such as coughing, sneezing, or in some cases fever. Face masks should also be worn by healthcare workers, by individuals who are taking care of or are in close contact with people who have respiratory infections or otherwise directed by a doctor. Face masks should not be worn by healthy individuals to protect themselves from acquiring respiratory infection because there is no evidence to suggest that face masks worn by healthy individuals are effective in preventing people from becoming ill. Face masks should be reserved for those who need them because masks can be in short supply during periods of widespread respiratory infection. Because N95 respirators require special fit testing, they are not recommended for use by the general public.
Again, Your Honor, I'm being told that there are people waiting outside who would like to testify, but there's not sufficient room.
Okay,
If
well,
anybody is finished and would like to leave and let those
hang
folks
on
come
one
in.
second, ma'am. So we got a couple of people that are leaving now. Thank you, folks, for testifying, and that gives time for others. So ma'am, go ahead and tell us who you are, and you can begin.
Hi, I'm Barb from Moscow, and I just want to say that you guys are, you're basically selling out my rights, and I'm sorry that you don't take that more seriously, that you guys want to protect your civil rights and not be discriminated against, and yet you're going to discriminate against me. And you need to look up the definition of terrorism, because this is actually terrorism. And you're Mayor Lambert, right?
That's correct.
You
What
are
was your last
actually
name
a
again?
terrorist.
What was your
And I
last
want you
name,
to
ma'am?
consider that.
Pardon
I
me?
want you to consider that.
I take everything very serious, what I do, ma'am. What did you say your last name was?
Doesn't sound like you're taking it very seriously, and I agree with what these
I
people have
take it
been
very
saying.
seriously, ma'am, and I have for 3 months.
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And there's only 25 people sick in a county of 40,000, over 40,000 people.
Yep.
And none of them are in the hospital, so you're not taking it seriously at all.
Thank you for that, Mayor.
You as well.
You should be arrested.
Folks out there, for the new folks that have came in, we are on item number 5, and there's about 10 minutes left, roughly. Or actually about 6 minutes left for anybody that wants to testify on number 5. They're willing to do it. Come up here and state your name, miss. Let us know what is on your mind.
Hi, Bill. It's Amy Paul.
Hello, Amy
Randy.
Paul.
Let me start by saying that I have been very thankful for the conversations over the past several months with both Brandy and Bill. Thank you. Each has responded right away when I've reached out. In the past, I have always been very proud of our diverse little city. I served proudly on the Chamber of Commerce board for 7 years. Currently, I'm saddened and disappointed in our city and the state of our city. The online finger-pointing and public shaming of businesses is astonishing. Recently, one of our city council members walked into my fellow businesses and shamed them openly with their opinion in front of the business's customers. This will not yield positive results with your constituents and is a poor example of the city reaching out to businesses. Each day we are learning more and more about SARS-CoV-2. An epidemiologist, Dr. Ramesh Adalja, in an interview with Johns Hopkins University, stated that the virus continues to mutate, with the most recent mutation proving to be more contagious but far less deadly, as we are currently seeing in our city. We are seeing a rise in cases with no hospitalizations. I would be very interested in the city posting the research or data used in the decision-making for our community with regards to both risk and rewards of wearing face masks. And if you have, please direct me where to find it, as I very well may not know where to be looking. With regards to my own business, I have relied on varying health organizations and leading epidemiologists such as Dr. Ramesh Adalja. The following was released on July 2nd, 2020, directly from the World Health Organization. People should not wear masks while exercising, as masks may reduce the ability to breathe comfortably. Sweat can make the mask become wet more quickly, which promotes the growth of microorganisms. The important preventative measure during exercise is to maintain physical distance of at least 1 meter from others. That is from the WHO. Like many others, I'm in favor of businesses being able to do just that, run their daily business, and contribute to our local economy, and preferably be able to run their day-to-day operations without an enormous amount of fear and anxiety of some sort of colossal public backlash if, in fact, an employee tests positive. The North Idaho Health District has fantastic resources for our local businesses. I spent 30 minutes on the phone with them last week as they answered all of my questions with regards to not if, but when I have an employee test positive. I passed along that same information to the other business owners who have reached out to me in anguish and are expressing the same concerns as I am. As the NIHD employee told me, this virus is not going away. It has become part of the now present landscape, and we need to figure out how to work with it and not around it. And that was their statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Come on up, miss, if you want. Do you have a mask you could wear? That'd be great. And some new folks have came in here, and has some wipes right here, Clorox wipes. When you're done, if you would please clean the speaker thing up for us just a little bit, we'd appreciate it. Give us your name, ma'am.
So my name is Katrina Matei, and I'm a local business owner. As my husband is, we own 2 businesses in town. And I was flabbergasted at the order to wear masks, as there is no scientific evidence that I have ever seen or heard of that they do any good. As a matter of fact, the N95 mask is made for contaminated areas, and when you breathe out, if you have COVID-19, you actually breathe out the COVID-19 to other people, because it's made for as OSHA says. And I would like to read a letter. It's a very interesting article, and this is from the Arizona mayor, as seen in USA Today. A small-town Arizona mayor has more sense than every major city mayor and governor combined. An Arizona mayor's letter to his city. Dear citizens of Eager, over the past several weeks, I have been asked repeatedly what the town of Eager plans to do about COVID-19. Masks, visitors, riots, etc. It is somewhat alarming how many expect and almost invite a more drastic infringement on their freedoms. My response from the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic has been that we will err on the side of freedom. When riots began to riddle the country and our governor took the drastic measure of a statewide curfew, again, I maintain that we will err on the side of freedom. I have received numerous phone calls from reporters, citizens, visitors, and complete strangers to our area asking why the town of Eager has not canceled upcoming rodeos and our 4th of July parade. Again, my response is that Eager will err on the side of freedom. What authority does the town of Eager or any other state or local government have to infringe on the rights of healthy, law-abiding citizens? It bears mentioning that I am not one that believes that the coronavirus is fake or any one of a dozen other theories disseminating across the internet. COVID-19 is a real virus that unfortunately has drastic negative effects on the health of some of the individuals that contract it. Just as with the flu virus, some of those individuals will die. I do not make light of the fact that its effects on individuals and families throughout the globe have been and will continue to be life-changing and/or life-ending. There are many individuals that risk serious peril if they were to contract the virus. Those individuals should take extreme precautions. I certainly would were I in that position. In fact, I would invite those individuals to please stay home and not attend our festivities. But don't ask that the government require it of healthy, law-abiding citizens. If an individual is fearful of contracting the virus, I would invite that individual to take every precaution they deem fit, including wearing masks, gloves, or a variety of other personal protective equipment. Those precautions do not harm me, and I will not judge you adversely for doing what you feel is best for you. But don't ask the government to require it of healthy, law-abiding citizens. As grim as COVID-19 is portrayed under the most drastic scenario, I dare say that we are facing a much more serious pandemic here in America.
And your time is about up. Please
Okay,
wrap
we
up.
are currently in the midst of the nation's first political pandemic. Never before in the history of America has ignorance and bigotry been more celebrated. Never before has our government been more eager and willing to take away freedoms from the citizens. Never before has the citizenry been more willing to give them up. Benjamin Franklin warned that those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserved neither liberty nor safety. I believe his warning is as applicable today as it ever was. Some will say that these safety measures have not impacted individual liberty. To them, I would quip Thomas Jefferson. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects that never was and never will be. The right to move about freely in public is one of the cornerstones of American democracy. In a panic frenzy created by the media, state and local governments trampled that right. Thank you.
Thank you. That ends our public comment period for this. And before I turn it over to council for talking about this, and if anybody out there thinks for 1 minute that I appreciate having to wear a mask myself, they're out of their flipping mind. I don't like wearing one any more than anybody else has. And I have responded to hundreds and hundreds of emails, many of them very much in favor of this. And of course, yes, we've had the vocal folks out there This is not a violation, ladies and gentlemen, of your constitutional rights, and someday it's going to be over with. Now, we're fortunate we haven't had anybody die. We're fortunate we have not overran our medical facilities with people in beds that other folks that have natural things that need to be dealt with in our hospitals. We're very fortunate and happy that way. Whatever you believe in is your own business. That's absolutely fine, because we all have freedom of speech. And that is all of us. Doesn't matter if it's the mayor or any citizen in this town. But I will say this, we don't take these things lightly. And where do we get our information? CDC, absolutely. The national epidemiologists in our nation, absolutely. Our state epidemiologists. And of course, our local health and state health folks, as well as the medical community. Now, there's many views, and I've read every kind of view possible, and some of the stuff out there is absolute baloney, I will get that. But I do pay attention to the medical end of this, ladies and gentlemen, as we all do. With that being said, we don't take this lightly. We sure as hell don't do this for some kind of a power or a privileged thing for us to do, because that's just not how we operate. Yes, I'm all about keeping our communities safe, and I'm going to tell you something, folks. We got 30,000 college kids coming between these two university towns in the next 5 to 6, 7 weeks. Then the universities have got protocols in place about how they're going to handle it. And will we avoid stopping COVID-19? Absolutely not. It's happening. It's going to continue to happen, and who knows what the end result will be. And none of us out here will really know what the end result will be until this thing is completely behind us. We won't know whether we've done right. We won't know whether we've done wrong. I'm very serious about businesses in this town. I want to do the best we can. If we have a panic with COVID and these universities close back up and do virtual training and those 30,000 kids leave, think about what that's going to do to the business community. I don't want to see that happen. And I will do whatever I can to prevent that from happening, because it's too important to our local economy and the folks that live here. With that, I'm going to turn it over to council. Who wants to speak first? Randy.
I have a lot to say, but I'll just start with, I'm a business owner, so my business has been impacted. We have been shut down. We opened, things were starting to pick back up, and then we had this spike. We have voluntarily closed. So my interest as a business owner, I have many different interests, but as a business owner, is for this to get behind us as soon as possible, which I'm sure everyone in this room and everyone watching this has that in common. We might not agree about how to do it, but we all want to see this pass as soon as possible. I think your mandate for the masks, what I have seen is there are many people out there who are afraid when they see someone without a mask. There's still a big misunderstanding that you wear a mask to protect yourself against COVID. It is true that N95s are really the only mask that is especially effective at that. Others are not. But it is also true that wearing a mask, like I'm doing right now, I'm not doing that because I'm afraid of getting the virus at this moment. I'm doing that because there's a period of time where you are asymptomatic. People talked about only people who are sick should wear masks. Great, if we only had a way to know if you are infectious and could wear a mask. We don't. There's a period of at least 48 hours where you can spread that virus unknowingly. And the only way to protect against that is for everyone to wear a mask. You know what, if you email me, I will definitely, that's one of the things I wanted to say. If anyone wants the data, I've been hearing a lot of talk about data. I've been looking at it. I've got data, and email me at my city email, and I will share that with you for sure. And it's not something to get bogged down in. You can read through it pretty quickly. And yes, and I also have, if anyone would like data to the information, all the dangers about rebreathing your carbon dioxide and all this other stuff, it has been 100% debunked, and I'm happy to share that with anyone too. I read the things that people send me, and I can...
and you've received hundreds of them.
Yeah, I've received hundreds of them. And I do have to say that over 95% of the emails that we have received have been in support of this mandate. I know that's not how it appears here tonight. That's not who came tonight. But we've received hundreds in support. And I do work in healthcare also. Now, that doesn't mean I'm an infectious disease expert. I'm not an epidemiologist. And it is not up to me to decide what thing that someone sends me from the internet should help me to make a decision about the best thing for the public health of this community. When we have experts out there, the top international and national public health organizations, our local hospital, are all telling us, they're advising us, that wearing masks can help slow the spread. No, it does not stop the spread. That's going to continue. That has to continue. But it buys us time while a vaccine is being developed. When all these experts worldwide, locally here in our hospital, are saying this is the best thing to do, how could I say, you know what, I know better than all of you experts, because I don't. I'm not that arrogant to think that I know better. And if that's the same advice that I'm getting from, and data changes, it is all about the data for me. I know we had someone who commented about the data. That is all it's about for me. It's not political. It's not about freedom. It's all about the data and what is best for the public health.
Okay.
I would like to be able to say something if I could. I've waited in line for a long time.
Well, if you want, I'll let this exception, because we limited the time period. If you want to come up and state your name, please put your mask on when you walk up here. And when you're done, Claire, we'll give you 2 minutes. How's that? Does that sound fair to you?
Thank you very much. Hold on. Not very good at the mask thing, I have to say.
Well, we're all practicing.
I'm working on it.
Well, we're all working on it. We all
Okay,
do.
we're working on it.
Okay.
My name is Heidi Scheibe. Was that all I was supposed to say? My
No,
name?
yep, that's all you need to tell us, Heidi. Thank you.
Whoa, sorry. You will recognize some of this, Bill. I wrote to Bill, and he responded to me, and I really appreciated that. But I just wanted to read this for everyone. I said, the recent mandatory mask ruling perplexes and alarms me for these reasons. Masks dehumanize, deface, and deface us, who are created in the image of God. They evoke fear. On my, when I'm out at the grocery stores, you can see the fear in people's faces, like, oh my gosh, this disease is back, and it's everywhere, and everyone's suspect. And our faces and our smiles give warmth, reassurance, and personalness. And we need this more than ever now, with all the fear and with all the depression and despair in our nation right now and in our cities. In light of the facts, only 16 cases when you decreed this bill. There were no deaths, no hospitalizations, and as we've already heard, masks have questionable effect. Even Dr. Fauci went flip-flopped on this one as well. The CDC had a 45-year study on viruses, and the effectiveness, they said, they were not very effective. And not to mention that all of our hurting businesses and families and employees. We were told by Dr. Fauci that reopening and testing would produce more cases, but the death rate has plummeted incredibly. And many doctors agree exposure to the virus by those not compromised is crucial to developing herd immunity. And one last thing, breaking news just happened. The WHO just said if you are not symptomatic, risk of passing it on is very rare.
I'm not going to take any more testimony, folks. If you got more things you want to write us, please write us. But we're going to continue this conversation. Like I said earlier, and some of you folks came in and didn't hear some of the earlier comments, who in the world loves to wear a mask? I don't like to wear a mask. I like to see people's face. That's why bank robbers use masks and hold-up artists so that people can't recognize who they are. It's part of that. We get all this. Something that Brandy said, we have got a mountain of information. And I haven't seen the report on Dr. Fauci flip-flopping. The last thing I saw the man say was the mask would be a very good thing, as well as others have said the same thing. So with that being said, we're following medical advice. None of us in here are medical people. None of you folks, none of us. We're not MDs. We try to follow the science of this thing. And the science of it, we've seen all kinds of different things that I don't know whether it's science or whether it's not science from some people. And if you read everything on the internet, it would drive you absolutely nuts because everybody flip-flops from one thing to another. You've got a big division in this country. And I got a good idea who started it and where it's coming from. And it's too bad because this is not a political thing. This is about our town. And we've got to work together in this town, whether we have 20 cases or 200 cases, in order to make it right for us. We don't do that. As I said earlier, these universities have been the bread and butter of this community for 129 years. We better be smart enough to recognize that and do that and hold on to them and keep them here best we can. If we don't do that, we're in trouble. And so that's part of what we're doing here, and I'm very serious about that. Now, other counselors have got a chance. I know Gina had something she wanted to comment.
Well, yeah, I don't know if y'all saw me doing this a couple minutes ago. Try having a hot flash wearing a mask. It's a good time. But I will tell you that, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I got elected to serve you and to try to make decisions with contrary and oftentimes voluminous data. One source says one thing, one source says another, and we have to try to make a decision that's going to be good for the entire 25,000 people in our community. And I see that I don't get to see your teeth or your mouth when you smile, but I can see Brandy smiling at me right here. And I see it way less as an issue of you're keeping your humanity away from me, and instead a sign of the fact that you care enough about the rest of your community to wear a mask. We don't know everything we're supposed to know at this point, and this is the right thing to do, in my opinion. That's all.
Sandra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hate wearing a mask. I hate it. I'm hot, I'm grouchy, and I'm so thankful that I have the opportunity to, because as I watch on television, as I watch in our towns, as I watch in other towns where people are sick and they're filling up hospitals and they're running out of bed space and our physicians don't know what to do. When I see it around our neighboring states, my heart breaks. And when I think that that could happen here in Moscow easily, I'm frightened to no end. And so I am happy to wear a mask, and I thank you for it. I miss downtown. I spend as much money downtown as I can. And I don't have much, but man, I try to. Even places I don't normally shop, I'll try and give a gift certificate to because I'm frightened for our downtown. I miss it. I miss going to the movies. I miss hanging out and having coffee or drinks with my friends. I still get some great dinners from the downtown places, and I love my mom dearly, and I love eating with her, but I'd sure love to eat with some other folks, right? I would. I miss it all. I miss, Gina and I only live about a block and a half away. I miss not being able to go out to her deck and be like, hey neighbor, how are you? Brandy lives across the street from my uncle, and I wave at her, but I can't really go up and just sit down for a minute and say, howdy, how's it going? I miss that. Same thing with Maureen up there. We're also neighbors. I used to walk by her house all the time, wave and have a visit with her, and we don't do that anymore, and I want that to come back, and I truly believe that the only way we do that, the only way we help each other is by wearing a mask. I don't want to get anyone sick. I understand the fear. I get fearful when I don't see someone in a mask because I see someone else that could be infected, and I don't want that. I believe looking at the data and listening to the information and reading the information, one of the very few ways we can slow this down is to wear a mask. And I hate my mask. It's cute and it's fun, and I'm grateful to the person that made it. I hate wearing it. I'm tired of wearing it, and I will wear it until we can flatten this out. And I'm thankful for that, and I stand with this. And I thank you, Mayor, for putting this in a week ago.
Thank you. Maureen, we haven't heard from you and Ann yet, so I'm going to go with you, Maureen.
Okay, so I want to say a couple things. One is, I agree, no one likes to wear a mask. But the answer is, I am concerned because I'm just going to point out a couple things that just came out today. Dr. Fauci put out a statement that said the nation's top infectious disease expert said Monday the status of the coronavirus pandemic in the U.S. is really not good as new cases surge across the country. He ends his speech by saying me just read it because I think it's really helpful. He specifically expressed dismay over people congregating in crowds and not wearing masks and inadequate attention being paid to guidelines on reopening. That is consistent with what Dr. Brown has said at Gritman Hospital. And I guess my sense is there are reasons that are people out there that are top experts saying it. And even if you don't believe them, I guess I really question whether or not putting a mask is worth the risk of the damage it can cause to our community. And that's a huge one, because the answer is, unless people feel comfortable walking around and they feel like they're safe, then we've got a problem on rebuilding our community. And no one likes to wear them, but you know what? We need to get used to it for a while until we can stem the flow, because our numbers do keep coming up. And our numbers today were 23 people in Latah County and 5 probable. And I think I'm not waiting to see how many people die from it. I'm looking at the fact that even young people who are getting it end up having problems with lungs, and heart problems. I will also say, in response to the issue of asymptomatic, there was a distinction between asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic. And the problem is, you may not get it from somebody who's asymptomatic and never has it, but the studies show that you don't know that somebody in fact is pre-symptomatic when they don't know they have it yet. And you can get it from someone who is pre-symptomatic. So if someone's walking around feeling perfectly healthy, they can be pre-symptomatic, and 3 days later, they're going to be the manifestations of the virus, but they are contagious at the stage of being pre-symptomatic. I really am in favor of the mayor's resolution, and I'm glad that he did it. And I'm really sorry that people have different views on it. But I guess I think the risk to our community and the science, we need to follow the science and the data. So I'm clearly in favor of it.
Thank you, Maureen. Ann, you haven't chimed in yet.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, one of my favorite things about living in Moscow is how engaged the community is. And I think you see that as evidenced by the people who wanted to come tonight and share their concerns and speak their minds, by the hundreds of emails we've gotten about this topic. As Brandy mentioned, most in support of this resolution. I miss that. I haven't been to an in-person meeting in months, and I wish that I could be there with you all to, to hear you in that way. But I, myself as an individual, I'm so nervous, and I don't want to be someone who lives in fear, and I don't want our community to feel that way. But I think that, as evidenced by the uptick in numbers, I think this is the right thing to do. And I understand that we've all been making a lot of sacrifices and to, varying degrees for people, and that it's been hard. And I feel that too. But I really think this is the right choice, and I appreciate everyone's continued sacrifice until this is no longer an issue in our community or country. And I guess that's all I have to say. I'm in support as well.
Thank you, Ann.
Mayor.
Randy.
I heard a couple of people ask what scientists, so again, please email me if you'd like. I don't want to go through a whole lot of back and forth, but there is, let's see, I have right here, this is an evidence review of 67 different randomized controlled trials and observational studies. And that's what you need to look for when you're looking at the science. It needs to be, have the proper controls, right? This is the compilation of a review of 67 studies. And the evidence indicates decreased transmissibility from the person with it to someone else when you are wearing a mask. That's a review of the 67 randomized controlled studies. So that's the type of science, but ultimately, again, it's coming from CDC, all of whom are looking at these studies. They're peer-reviewed studies, and coming to, that's where we're getting our information from. And for me to think, I know, or a mayor in Arizona, I don't know what his qualifications are, but unless he is an infectious disease expert, I think I would have no justification to follow his lead.
Well, with that being said, the numbers in Arizona have spiked. I mean, it's a hotbed here in this country right now. I've got friends that winter down there and they come up here in the spring, that are not gonna be going back down there this fall because of that very thing. So, you know, there's all kinds of stories out there. But we're going by the medical evidence. That's kind of interesting because somebody said Dr. Fauci, the leading epidemiologist, flip-flopped. And now we're hearing today that he's saying that. So evidently, and maybe that was something somebody saw out in the internet. I've got no idea. But there's so many things out in the internet. We need to follow what we can decide on. We don't want to dehumanize anybody. I'm very serious about this town, this wonderful town that we all live in. I have been. I've been here for 44. This is my 44th year here. If anybody in their right mind thinks I'm doing this just for grins, they're out of their flipping mind. I've got better things in my life to do, as does everybody else. And like I said earlier, I don't like wearing a mask either. I've done it for the last 2 months. I'm going to do it until till the thing's by us. And someday it will be. This isn't forever, folks. We've got to work hard in this town to make it happen for ourselves. And we don't do that, we're going to be in trouble. We don't wait till there's 2,000 and Gritman cannot handle the overflow or Pullman Hospital when they can't take care of other patients that need help too, just as well. We know that. So, with that being said, Sandra, and then I'll come back to you, Gina.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move that we adopt the resolution extending the amended Public Health Emergency Order 20-03 until August 4th, 2020.
Second and third.
No comments, sir.
And I would like to say 2 more things along here. So,
Give me the vaccine, take my guns. You guys are wrong.
all right, so data, as far as flip-flopping, data changes. It's growing. Science changes. This is a new virus. We are still learning about it. There's a lot unknown. As more is known, the recommendations change. That's what we've been seeing with the WHO and the CDC. So that's just part of science. It's a continual learning process. We take new information and we take that into consideration. If we get new information 2 weeks from now that is different than what we have now, that makes us think this is no longer valid and effective, then I think we would be open to that and we would discuss it again.
Well, we have 2 council meetings every month. I mean, this is not, they're not going to not see us for a while. We're going to be here in 2 weeks. Any more debate or comment before I call for a roll? Any more?
Just that, this is the best decision for the community. The people who are bothered by this, I apologize to. I understand that you are upset by this. We're going to take care of you too. And if we try to keep it in perspective, it's a mask.
Okay, with that, I will read.
Oh, Maureen might have something.
Maureen.
I just want to add to that, and one thing is that it broke my heart to walk down Main Street and see businesses closed. And when we started opening up, I felt like we need to make sure that our businesses can stay open, and that you need to make sure that you can build in a confidence that people feel comfortable walking in there and that they're going to be safe. And for that reason, it's another reason why I think masks are a good thing. You need to convince people that it's going to be safe in there and that I'll come in there and shop.
And I have heard from many other business owners too, who are very grateful, Mayor, for your order. And they think that will be in their best interest in the long time of their business, to restore consumer confidence, to keep our numbers down. Once numbers go down, they can open back up, and that it can keep them open. So you have a lot of business owners that are very appreciative, including myself.
Thank you, Brandy. Okay, with that, we've got a motion by Sandra and a second by Gina to adopt the resolution extending the amended Public Health Emergency Order 20-03 until August the 4th. Maureen, I'll start to roll with you.
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
And Brandy.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. With that, we will move on to item number 6 on our agenda, which is State and Local Agreement Project Development Public Avenue Coordinator Safety Improvements. We have Elisa with us tonight doing the presentation. Elisa, are you out there somewhere?
Yes, I am, Mayor.
Okay.
Looks like I need to have Zach allow my video to be heard.
Zach, can you help get the video up on the Lisa, please?
There we go. Okay.
Oh, there. Hello, Elisa. There you are.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. On a different topic here tonight, I have something that I think will make all the public happy. We have before you tonight an approval of a grant application that we submitted back in 2019. It is called the Public Avenue Safety Corridor Improvements. And we did not receive notice of this approval until April of 2019, but now we're just now getting the first contract in the stage of development. So before you tonight, we have what is called the development agreement, state local development agreement, to begin the design of the project. And Nate Sir, my coworker, who works on these grant projects with me, is the engineer in charge of this, and he's going to go over the project with you, and then we'll come back to me to go ahead and work through the approval of the agreement and the resolution.
Okay, thank you very much, Elisa. All right, in just a moment, I'll share a screen with everyone. Can everybody see that now?
Yes. You see
Yes.
it, Nate?
Excellent. So my name is Nate Sir. I'm with the engineering division. And as Elisa mentioned, this is talking about the Public Avenue Safety Corridor and specifically the state local agreement for design. So I'll just go into a little bit of brief history on this. Some of you may have seen this before during the application or other information sessions that we brought to council. This is a section of Public Avenue between Polk Street and Lincoln Street. It's about 1,100 feet long, and it's an old county road. And like most of the old county roads, it has kind of a minimal cross section. There are 12-foot lanes, but it's only got a 1-foot wide shoulder. And the majority of the area has a ditch along the corridor that's at least a foot deep and in various places much deeper. So the areas of concern with this corridor are we're seeing a high number of angle crashes and road departure crashes. And in fact, this area this is one of the areas, one of the few areas in Moscow where we have a fatality. Someone was attempting to navigate this corner that you see here in this photo, left the road, went into the ditch, rolled the car, and one of the occupants was killed. So this, it's a big deal when we have something like that happen in Moscow, and we need to do what we can to address the safety concerns here. We also see that despite this being a fairly lightly traveled corridor, it only represents about 1/3% of the total traffic in Moscow, but we see almost 5% of the total injury accidents in the whole city on this corridor, and that's for the 5-year region of study. And this is made worse by the fact that there are no pedestrian facilities. So what is a fairly tight, difficult to navigate situation becomes even worse if you add a bicyclist or a pedestrian, someone walking a dog that has to use the travel lane because there's no sidewalk or other areas for them to use. What we had proposed to the state was that we would turn the ditches into a storm sewer main on both sides of the road, similar to what we did on Polk Street, just to the north of this project. And that will allow us to rebuild the road section to include full bike lanes, a tree lawn, and sidewalks. So that will make if there is a road departure crash in the future, it's less likely to result in an overturn. It's much more likely to keep injury as to a minimum. And that's the goal of this project here. We initially applied for a larger project, which would include public all the way to Orchard. It was about twice the size of the project and about little more than twice the cost. So that had a price tag of about $1.85 million. And although when we submitted our application to the state, they liked the application, they just simply weren't able to allocate that much of the annual safety funds to any one entity. So they asked us if we could shrink the corridor a little bit, and Elisa and I were able to put our heads together and find out, where the areas of greatest concern were, and that led us to the conclusion of stopping the corridor at Lincoln Street rather than going all the way to Orchard Avenue. And for that, we were offered, in a little less than half because it's a slightly less complicated section. And that brings our local match down to $64,600. Lisa talked about this a little bit, but I just wanted to show where we are in our current status. We've gone through the application, we've been awarded, and we're about ready to transition into our design phase. This state-local agreement will allow us to solicit proposals from consultants to perform the design on this corridor, and that will take place, some information gathering this winter, going through spring and fall of 21, and will be ready to construct in the construction season of 22. And with that, are there any questions?
This has been a strip of road that has been in need of fixing for 30 years that I know of, and so this will be a good thing. Just like any of the other things that we've had tonight, I will allow time on this one for public input as well. So if somebody wants to come up, and if they're out there in the audience that'd like to talk on this, I would give them 3 minutes like I have everybody else, and let them chat about it. Okay, with nobody coming up to the podium, I will go ahead and say, turn it over to council. Who wants to start? Gina?
Well, I was going to make a motion.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the state-local agreement and the corresponding resolution for project development for the Public Avenue Corridor Safety Improvement Project Number A022402.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Gina and a second by Sandra to approve the state and local agreement and the corresponding resolution for project development for the Public Avenue Corridor Safety Improvements Project Number A022, in parentheses, 402. So I will start to roll with Brandy.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Anne Marine.
Aye.
Okay, very good, thank you. Well, with that, we'll move on to item number 7, which is 2020 Water and Sewer Rate Study Recommendations. Tyler Palmer is with us tonight. Hi, Tyler.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Good to be with you. All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and take a moment to share something that's been in the works for a little bit over a year now. Rate studies are a long and complicated process, but it's something that's really critically important for our infrastructure, and it's important that we get right. So what I'd like to do tonight is I'll provide some background and some context, and then we have Sergey Tarasov here with us from FCS Group, who's the city's consultant on the rate study and has worked with the city of Moscow on several previous rate studies. And he will go through a little bit more of the specifics for this particular rate study. And then we will review what the process that we're proposing from here. And Gary will have some information that he'll share about some of the budgetary ramifications as we look toward the FY21 budget. So if you'll bear with me for just a second, I will share my screen. All right, can you all see that now?
Yes.
Great. So as I mentioned, in May of 2019, the city initiated a water and sewer rate study. Rate studies are conducted periodically to assure that the cost of our services with the utilities are in alignment with the revenue to the utilities, and that said costs are allocated in as equitable a manner as possible. We have users of a system, and these utility systems, I know as a kid I used to play SimCity, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with that game, but it's a video game where you actually just build a city. And the very first thing you have to do is install the water and sewer lines before you can build anything else. And that's just the story of civilization. That's just the first thing that goes in. It's the most critical thing. The story of why any city is where any city is because of the availability of those resources and the ability to deliver those to our residents. So it's critically important, and it's just a perfect example of a common pool resource. It's something that every resident in our city needs and uses every single day. And so it's something that we all band together to make happen, and we do that through our public utilities. And it's something that I really enjoy doing. I like the critical need-driven nature of that work. And one of the things I'm proud of is that Moscow has been tried to be very responsible with our management of those utilities. Utility rates, because each system is dependent on the specific conditions in which it finds itself, utilities can vary greatly. The last city that I worked for in the Salt Lake area, for example, we were in a situation where we could buy our water at bulk. We didn't have to produce our own water. We didn't have to filter or treat our own water. And we were in a situation where the slopes allowed for an entirely gravity sewer system, meaning we didn't have to pump any of the sewer, and we didn't have to treat it. There was a regional treatment facility. So there was a totally different dynamic, and every community has this. Every community has different sources, different discharge points, and that drives a need for different infrastructure. And I'm going to review a little bit just some of those infrastructure needs specifically in Moscow, and the way that we try and maintain this infrastructure in a thoughtful, proactive way so that we can keep it running and keep it healthy for our community. Typically, rate studies are done on a 5-year term. That's a very common term for a rate study. What that allows us enough lead time between studies that we're not constantly engaged in utility study, but as conditions change, it allows us to change and adapt to those conditions. One example I will give is that in our previous capital plan, we had the Northwest water tank included in the capital plan for replacement, which would probably come in somewhere around $6 million. In the interim, we had some rule changes that allowed us, through some creative use of the system, to use our aquifer as storage with the appropriate backup power. And so we were able to eliminate a $6 million item from the budget. At the same time, though, we've seen some big cost increases for things like booster stations. And so it's why it's a really good thing to revisit these periodically to make sure that we are maintaining the system and keeping the cost as equitable as we can. So there are two components to a utility rate. You have the base rate, and then you have the consumption rate. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. But the things that go into determining the rate, what we do is we look at what are the needs of the utility. And the needs of the utility are broken down into two primary areas, which are operations and maintenance and capital. Operations and maintenance are kind of what you might think they are. It's the activities that we have to engage in to keep these items going day to day. So if you think about it like your personal vehicle, these are the oil changes. These are the tire rotations. These are changing the belts. These are the things to keep the vehicle going. But then if you're wise with your budgeting, you're putting money away toward the eventual replacement of that vehicle, knowing that it will wear out. And that's the capital component. So the capital component is the money that we have, that we save up for these big capital costs, so that we can replace that water line, so that we can replace that pump station, so that we can make sure that we have these very expensive infrastructure components funded through our utility rates. The capital component represents by far the largest cost to the utility, just because these are large and expensive components, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But also on the operations and maintenance side, it requires a lot of specialized equipment. What you see on the screen here is our jet truck. This is just one of the vehicles, specialized vehicles, that is absolutely imperative in running our systems. This is a vehicle that will run a high pressure hose up a line to clean it, and then it has a vacuum component so that we can remove debris from a line. If we ever have a sewer backup, this is the unit that responds, and it's out daily, just routinely cleaning the system and making sure that we keep things flowing. And this is almost a $500,000 vehicle. And these are things that just come up that we've got to have in order to maintain and run our system. So with the water system, I just want to dive in a little bit, just the history of our water system and talk about what we've got and where we're at. As you'll see on this list, there are several items that you'll see that are in service that have been around for a long time. Our first well was drilled in 1892. It was in use for a little over 70 years. It was abandoned in 1963. With the Northwest tank, which is the tank I just spoke of, was in service for 100 years. We used that tank for 100 years and discontinued the use of that tank last year in 2019. Well 2 was drilled in 1925, so that's been in service for 95 years, and it is still in service. That's over on Main Street, and A Street there at the water department, as is well number 3, which has been in service for 92 years. The northeast tank has been in service for 80 years. That's at Rotary Park at the intersections of Orchard and F. Our Taylor Booster Station that we're working on, we've got replaced 63 years that was in service. Well 6, 63 years. That's the well that is down by the city shop. Well number 8 was drilled in 1964, so it's been in service for 57 years. The Southeast Reservoir, 53 years. Well 9, 39 years, which is out by the Palouse Mall. And the Vista Reservoir was built in 1991. And so you can see that this is long-term infrastructure, and it's good that it's long-term because it's very expensive infrastructure. Recently in 2016, we drilled well 10, which is up off of A Street at the city limits, just up above Walmart and La Quinta in there. And that we're excited to be doing the well development and getting ready to bring that well onto the system. And so we're in the process now of finalizing design and getting ready to put out to bid the development of that well. So we've got the hole in the ground now, and we've got to put the pump on and tie it into the system and do all of that work. But that's really great. That's the first well since well 9, so in over 30 years. With our sewer system, as you can imagine, we have a lot of old pipe in the ground. We still have a lot of 100-year-old clay pipe out in our sewer system. There used to be treatment ponds over by Stadium Way, and so there were ponds there that were there for quite some time. In 1918, they extended a trunk line from where Stadium Way is to where our current water reclamation and reuse facility sits. And so that allowed the discontinuation of the use of those ponds on Stadium Way. We had our first, what would be considered a treatment facility constructed, rather than just a pond, was constructed in 1938. That was to the tune of $73,000, which adjusted for inflation is $1.4 million in today's dollars, which is still a pretty darn good price when you get into this treatment stuff, because as you'll see from some of these numbers that follow, wastewater treatment is an expensive game. They upgraded that facility to a trickling filter system, and that was to the tune of $196,000 at the time, which in today's dollars is $1.8 million. We had a couple additional trunk line projects, and then as you can see, several additional modifications to the water reclamation and reuse facility, which at the time was called the wastewater treatment plant. And those are in response to what we call an NPDES permit, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. This is a permit that takes a look at what our receiving body is for our discharge from our treatment facility, and determines and makes sure that we don't have a detrimental impact on that receiving water. And so in our case, it's Paradise Creek is where we discharge. And so there have been several steps that we've had to take over the years, several phases of different compliance that we've had to look at in order to make sure that we meet things like temperature and phosphorus and dissolved oxygen, so that we're not having a detrimental impact on the environment. The last bullet point you can see there is phase 5, which is upcoming in this cycle and was considered in this rate study. And that is the project that anticipates dealing with the temperature component of our NPDES permit, which we've discussed at length with the council. And so that's something that will be coming forward. One of the big points of pride for our facility is that since 1977, we have saved 3.5 billion with a B gallons of water by having one of the first reuse systems in the country that sent our our treated effluent to the University of Idaho to water their green spaces, including their golf course. And so that's just kind of an overview of the utilities. Those are kind of the big ticket capital items that we look at in addition to the maintenance and operations that we need to take into account and be ready to replace and stay on top of. Our community planning and design group does a wonderful job with the capital program. That's been revamped over the course of the last year and a half. And it's really in a great spot. So we're very happy about the level of organization and coordination that we can now see between the utilities, trying to maximize our bang for every buck that we have. One of the particular things that we were asked to take a look at as we went into this rate study was the commercial sewer rate. As we do rate studies, one of the continual goals is to try to balance stability of income for the utility, because that's just imperative. We have to have enough money to maintain the utility, but we want to do that as equitably as possible. So there's a balance between trying to push for equity and the stability. And this goes back to what I talked about with base rates versus consumption rates. And so the more that a base rate is the most stable thing for a utility because it's, you know, what's coming in every single month, whereas a consumption rate can vary. And so as you skew more toward a consumption rate, it can have a derogatory impact or can have a detrimental impact, on the stability. And so that's something that we really tried to refine this time and take a look at how our commercial sewer rates were categorized, with the goal being, if you contribute to the system at a certain level, that should be how much you pay. It shouldn't be crazy disproportionate. You shouldn't pay way less than what your contribution merits, and you shouldn't pay way more than what your contribution merits. It's trying to hone that in better. And so as we were directed, we looked at that and looked at several different examples from around the country in cooperation with FCS at different ways that could be done. And one of the things we came across is that our current structure has 9 different categories, 8 commercial that you can see here on the screen. And when you have that many different categories, it leads to a lot of things in between in the cracks, and you're trying to categorize things in a different way, and it can make it very difficult for us to have clarity. And it was also very base rate driven, and so like a lot of the income was based on the base rate rather than consumptive. And so what we're proposing in this that we'll get into a little bit more here is a transition to a simpler system for commercial customers of low, medium, and high, and then having lower base rate proportionately and having the rate more skewed toward a consumptive rate, so that lower users aren't paying disproportionately more while higher users don't pay disproportionately less. Just one example for why that really stands out that I think helps illustrate this for the problem that we had with our previous categorization, or one of the challenges that we had is grocery stores, for example. They fell under what's called the other commercial category. So they would be in the same category as like an office building. Now, if you think about the discharge from a sewer perspective between a grocery store and an office building, it's just not even close. You know, grocery stores have become small cities. They're amazing places, as the mayor well knows, worked in them for decades. They do everything. You got a florist, you got a baker, you got a butcher, you've got a restaurant, full-blown restaurants in these things. And so they produce everything. And so it just was fundamentally, it was a real area where we saw an opportunity to have better equity was by looking at things like that and saying, okay, if that's just not the right category, it's just the category that we had that would fit. And so now that we'll go through a process to make sure people are appropriately categorized, and then the usage is really what drives the rate. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Sergey with FCS, and he's going to dive a little bit more into this. So I'll stop sharing my screen so he can share his.
Thank you, Tyler, and good evening, Council and Mayor. Can everybody hear me okay and see me okay?
You're good to go.
Great. All right, and I am now sharing my presentation. Is that a good resolution?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, again, thanks a lot for taking the time to meet with me tonight to talk to you about the results of the rate study. Tyler did an amazing job summarizing kind of the process. We have been engaged with the city, working on this study for about a year, a little bit over a year, working with staff as well as engaging citizen committees. And again, the staff of the city has done an amazing job just outreaching, developing videos, forming committees, providing online information on the study information. So there's quite a bit of information, educational information out there for folks to look at and reference on the study process. So the purpose of today's meeting is really to dive into the results, as Tyler has outlined the backbone of the formulation of the analysis, and we'll kind of dive into what are the outcomes. Now, before we really dive into what the results are, I wanted to get everybody on the same page in terms of the terminology and the process itself that we complete when we work on a comprehensive study such as the one we're doing for the city. So on this slide, you're viewing a graphic for the overview for the overall rate study process. This includes 3 steps. Step number 1 can be summarized in what's called the revenue requirement. And if you think about it from a simple perspective, the revenue requirement really tries to make sure that the expenses we have on the system today as well as in the future, because we always want to look out in the future to account for those one-time large costs such as the Sewer Systems Phase 5 project, really make sure that our rates today can meet our ongoing obligations. And here we always emphasize that it needs to occur on a standalone basis where the water utility is paying for water costs and the sewer utilities paying for sewer costs. We're not performing any subsidization between the utilities. The next step, which is typically called the cost of service, it tries to look at equity and really tries to answer the question of equity. Do cost differences exist to provide service to different classes? Now here, if you think of revenue requirement, that's first step as the pie. Cost of service really is the slices of the pie, trying to figure out how big is the pie related to each class of classification of service. And finally, once you complete these first two steps, you can move on to the final step, kind of the big communication step, the development of those fixed and variable charges. So there's a lot of background that goes into it. As I mentioned, we've gone over quite a bit of detail internally as well as with committee members. So today, we're just showing you kind of the results of majority of these steps. I will start with the results of the water revenue requirement analysis. So on this slide, what you're looking at is a graphic at the top, and this is a visual summary of the next 5 years plus the current year projection for the fiscal year 2020. And here, really, the bars represent the summary of your expenses comparing to revenues at current levels with that solid black line. Now, the bars are made up of operating and maintenance expenses in the dark gray, followed by kind of lighter yellow color for existing debt service. And you'll notice that the existing debt service doesn't start until 21 and then increases in 22. We just recently secured 2 low interest loans, and the structure of those loans does not have them begin their payment until the projects are completed. Since they're tied to some of the projects that are being finalized, the payments are not scheduled to start until about fiscal year 21, and then the total loan or both loans will not start to kick in until 22. Finally, the last portion of the bar is represented with a blue color. That's related to rate funded capital. There's a small sliver, a little bit of brown sliver at the top, or a little orange color. That's representing either additional capital funding or reserve policy type compliance. It's a very minor component of the overall expenses. So when we're looking at the total bars and comparing them to the expenses, we notice that if we go out in the future, we're projecting that currently we're meeting our complying with our costs, but as we go out even 2 years, we're not going to be able to meet our just the debt service that we have acquired recently. And then if you go out a couple of years more, we're not going to be able to meet our operating and maintenance expenses. In the interim, if we're not able to meet operating maintenance, we're not able to even fund any sort of level of capital beyond the currently acquired debt service. So if we are going to be moving forward to maintaining our system, replacing our system, our rates at current levels are not sufficient. So the strategy that we've discussed through the committees is an annual 5% rate increase for the next 3 years, followed by 2 years of 4%. Now, for a typical residential home that's using 8 CCF, which is an average city average, 800 cubic feet of consumption per month, that's approximately $2.77 increase in fiscal year 2021. So, and then the future years you can see in the table down below. So that's the revenue requirement. In terms of the cost of service analysis, when we performed the cost of service analysis, we found that based on the prior studies, the prior study that was completed, the results were fairly consistent. There's typically a range of reasonableness in the rate setting industry for cost of service due to fluctuations in your rate customer base, due to fluctuations in how you're budgeting and you're actually expending your costs. So typically we say if you're within the 5% range of reasonableness, plus or minus, you can be considered within cost of service. And what we found for the water utility, that the classes that we evaluated were within the equity realm of reasonableness, meaning that there's no inequities occurring that are significant. So what we're proposing to do is just to apply the overall 5% rate increase and the other remaining years across the board or proportionally to all cost components, including the base charge, which is called the monthly charge in this chart, and the volume charge down below. So what this table is summarizing is your current existing structure under the first numerical column in the table, currently in place today. The first portion of the table shows you that the residential customers currently have a single fixed charge per month of $34.38, and non-residential customers pay a charge that increases with meter size, starting at $34.38, going all the way up to $433 for a 4-inch meter. On the volume side, your residential customers are currently on a conservation type structure where their usage, as you exceed a certain threshold, a block or a tier if you want to call it, you start paying more consumption once you get into that tier. So the lowest tier, 0 to 700 cubic feet, is about $2.56 per 100 cubic feet or per CCF. As you get up to the blocks, block 3 becomes $5.14 only for usage above 20 CCF. The non-residential customers are currently paying a fee that is the same per unit of consumption. So the increases are applied equally, 5% equally to both the fixed monthly charge and the volume charge down below. Any questions before I move on to the sewer utility? Okay.
Well, I think you can continue on. I mean, you know, we're mesmerized by numbers, which about puts everybody to sleep, but we'll work
All
through
right,
it, so.
I will try to keep it brief. On the sewer side, a similar picture summarizing the results. Here you can see the bars are quite a bit closer to the line, so this utility is doing quite a bit better. So in order for us to complete the capital program, which does include the Phase 5 project, as Tyler mentioned, within this 5-year period, we're looking at, actually, we're able to defer any rate action in fiscal year 2021. So this time, there's no rate action proposed for this utility in 21 in terms of overall rate increases. We'll get into the specifics of that in a minute. While future years are looking at more inflationary level increases for us in order for us to fund that capital program in the future, we need and keep up with cost inflation, we need inflation level adjustments. And for a typical residential home, once those do come about, that's about $1.20 or so per month per year with a 2.25. But again, the first year, big picture, no rate adjustments until we get into the rate design portion of the discussion. On the sewer side, this chart provides you a brief summary of your current rate structure in place today. And as Tyler mentioned, there's quite a few different classes, and their fixed charges vary quite a bit. So if you'll see, rooming houses are as high as $344 a month. Other commercials, bars and taverns, and churches are about $72 a month. And then there's also a volume charge, which varies based on an assumed strength contribution. So a restaurant that typically has quite a bit higher effluent contribution, higher concentration in their effluent, will have a higher volume rate compared to somebody who doesn't have any as high a contribution or has a lower contribution. So what we were finding, and again, it's a very common trend in the industry, is that there's a lot of variability that could occur within the same business designation. So as an example, a coffee shop or a motel might have food services on site, and they'll be acting more like a restaurant, while a different type of coffee house or a motel might not have food services on site and will have very light contributions. It'll be more like an office or a residential contribution level strength. Yet they're all going to be combined in the same current business. So that's why, again, the nexus of the proposal of this strength-based charge is to really not necessarily align by business type, but really allow the customers to go into these new categories based on their actual contribution where available. So the proposal is to keep the single and multifamily at this time the same as they are, so the structure doesn't change for residential customers. On the non-residential customers, everybody would move to the same fixed charge. So this is the same, if you go back to the previous slide, the churches, barns, and other commercial, that's exactly the same charge. Everybody will be assessed on an account basis. There will not be an extra unit charge at this time. And then the strength differential will mainly come from the volume rates. So the volume rates will be higher, but they'll capture the same level of revenue. So the goal, big picture, is to, at this point, collect as revenue neutral revenue as we can from the non-residential class. So I caveat it because it's as a class as a whole. So in order for us to test this theory, we used historical statistics, applied the existing rates, the proposed rates, and we wanted to get as close to zero as possible. And that's what you guys are seeing in the upper table. You'll never be perfect zero in this situation, but this is pretty close to revenue neutral as we could get using historical data. But what happens is when you dive into each individual class, because you're restructuring rates, the current accounts, the way they're currently categorized, will see a wider degree of impact. Overall, it'll still be revenue neutral as one class, but individually, there's going to be different impacts. Some customers will see decreases, some customers will see increases. A lot of it has to do with being assessed a high fixed fee, as you saw. Again, going back a couple of slides, a couple of customers are paying quite a bit more in their classes than others. So a reduction may occur because of the reduction of the fixed charge. Also, the assessment of multi-unit fees. Customers that have a lot of unit fees will be reduced, and a lot of the charge will be transferred to the consumption fee. Alternatively, some of the customers that are going up will be due to high consumption. Now, there could be situations where there might be some irrigation usage that might be being captured. So this one opportunity for these customers is to make sure that irrigation is not going through the same meter, or potentially install an irrigation meter or incentivize conservation. That's where they could see or realize savings. So this time, again, big picture, revenue neutral as a one class. But if you dive in deeper within the new residential low, within the new median or new high, individual accounts will be shifted around and assessed differently. And you'll notice in each table, you'll see other commercial repeating in each three categories. Again, it's because we went over with staff by individual account, by business type, and evaluated, by business, do they fit more into the low category, medium, or high category based on the type of business they have in place. Now, the city will definitely offer an appeals process. So if we have categorized somebody into high or medium, and the business owner feels that they're more in line with low concentration levels, the city will provide an appeals process where the business owner can demonstrate with data to the city and prove that they need to be in the low category, and they will be recategorized. So because of that, we're not proposing to perform a cost of service analysis for this utility because of this significant change and because of that appeal process that may occur in the next year or two. Again, things will be changing, and we don't want to base cost of service on a year that's not going to be representative of the average. So that's the typical time that you do want to perform a cost of service. So in summary, again, looking at the 3 steps of the study, on the water utility overall, we need approximately 5% for the next 3 years, and then the 4% in the last 2. On the sewer side, we're deferring rate action in the first year, following it with inflationary level increases starting in year 2 and thereafter in that 5-year period. Cost of service, water is within a range of reasonableness. Sewer, we want to postpone any changes just due to the significant changes in the rate design. And then finally, on the rate design side, water, no structural changes. Sewer, proposal is to transition to strength-based rates with an appeals process available to the customers and continue monitoring the impact of these changes. Again, the goal would be to have the rates go into effect in this coming October 2020.
Great. Thank you, Sergey.
Okay, Tyler, are you guys done with your presentation?
Pretty close, Mayor.
Well, what else you got to tell us?
All right, I'm just going to run really quick through the public process, Mayor, and then we'll...
Let me ask you a question. So the public process, you're talking about folks that want to know how this works and that type of thing? I mean,
just talking about the implementation piece with the Citizen Rate Committee, Mayor. Do you want me to hold off on going through that?
Well, no, go ahead and go with it. I got some things to ask you when you're done here.
Sounds good. So implementation, Sergey alluded to this. This is a pretty significant change to the structure of our commercial rates, and so implementation will be important. We are already engaged in an industrial survey, and so we've already gone through and made some initial categorization, and we'll be refining that process. One of the things we really like about this is that there is that customized approach to this. It's not just based on what you call yourself, it's based on your actual contribution to the system. But since this is a significant change, it will take significant public outreach. And so we have a public outreach plan put together where we will contact personally any business that's impacted and establish thresholds for what that contact looks like. So if they're contacted more, we'll reach out and have a one-on-one conversation. We will also make available consultations because as Sergey alluded to, the great thing about this is it does give the customer more autonomy and control over what their bill looks like. And so a lot of the ones that we've looked at where there was a more significant percentage impact, often it was something where, you know, they have an irrigation component, that consumption, there's something that they can do about that. One of the big ones is that it does encourage conservation. You can change out devices and you can have an impact. And so that ability to have more control over your bill is important. And Sergey alluded to this already. We will have an appeals process. We've got the appeals process being drafted right now, by which somebody can say, hey, I feel like I've been miscategorized. You know, based on my activities, I don't think that I'm a medium or I'm a high. So yeah, we are delaying the full cost of service implementation during that first year or two period as we let the dust settle. As we get through and we figure out, okay, we make sure everyone's in the right categories and that they've had the opportunity to take the steps that they need to make sure that it's not a disproportionately burdensome impact on them. So we convened a citizen rate committee. The citizen rate committee members were assigned by the mayor. The goal of the citizen rate committee is to represent the community and the views of the community, to provide input on the rate structure and the options that are associated and the impacts, and then to formulate a recommendation ultimately for the city council. This was a little bit of a challenging thing for us to do in the time of COVID, and so we had to get kind of creative. These are the members of the committee that served on the committee. We tried to, I think that it was a really good committee. It represented a lot of different sectors of the community, and we got a lot of great feedback and a lot of things that were then incorporated into tweaks that we made as we move forward. And so it was really a very active and participatory committee. We had a first meeting that we did online. So we sent out an introductory message with a lot of information, some general goals, and a video presentation that would usually have been conducted in person. And then we distributed an in-depth rate presentation. We had a video meeting, which was recorded, which went into a lot more depth. We fielded questions from the rate committee, and then we drafted comprehensive responses and sent those out so that we could then review that Q&A sheet in the in-person meeting. On June 3rd, we went with that committee in person, reviewed the Q&A sheet, had a group discussion, and in the end, the committee was unanimous in their recommendation to City Council for approval of the rates and rate structure as presented. From there, we did an open house. Again, had to do something different for us. We did an online open house. At the online open house, we had it open for public comments between June 22nd and July 2nd. The information that we included were the video introduction that gives a comprehensive look at our utility systems and how utility rates work. The technical presentation that was provided to the Citizen Rate Committee that goes into depth about the specific proposal. We made available the Citizen Rate Committee reports and minutes that summarized all of the activities and the questions that were in there, and then a question and answer section with the ability for anybody to submit a question, answer, or comment that we would then post to that section. We were happy to have 138 unique page visits. We pushed it out on social media. We pushed it out. We put out a press release. It was picked up by the newspaper. It may not seem like a ton for a town of 25,000 people, but if we held an open house, a traditional open house, and we had that many people show up, we would have been ecstatic. Usually we've got more staff than we have people in the room for things like this. And so that was good. They actually had 112 people watch the video, the introduction video. The one that shocked me is 25 people actually watched the technical presentation, which is about an hour and 20 minutes, and it's very technical. We had 21 questions and answers that we posted that seemed to field the questions. We really didn't field questions from the public generally. Those were all came through email and in person from the rate committee. So that is the long and short of the public outreach portion of this. And I know that at this point, Gary was going to talk about the budgetary impacts, but Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you want to interject here or have Gary do his segment.
Yeah, well, I think it would be a good time for me to interject something. You talk about implementation and talking to people, and of course, as everybody knows, our city's not very excited when they get some surprises, so the implementation thing of this is going to be very critical. And when we talk about all these numbers, and we're talking to our customers out there, the citizens, we got to break it down not into the whole term, the whole world picture of what we do with our sewer rates and or our water rates, but what is specifically important to them, whether they're a business or whether they're just a citizen at home or whether they're an apartment owner or whatever. And that's going to be critical, in my view. So I'm glad that to see that we had that many hits on that unique page site and the questions that were answered. And I can't imagine anybody watching that technical thing, to be honest about it. It'd drive me nuts because those types of things are not very exciting. Anyway, with that, Tyler, I'm going to go ahead and let Gary talk. Gary?
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. I won't spend a lot of time on the budgetary impacts. I was very impressed with the work that was done, FCS, Citizens Rate Committee. You talk about the impacts to different classes of ratepayers, and I think that rate committee did a great job of that, fleshing out a lot of the intricacies. As you know, in this time of COVID-19, and we'll talk a little more about this the rest of the night, but one of the things the council has asked is that we look at opportunities to try and lessen impacts as we're moving forward. So we looked at implementation, and you heard Sergey talk about on the sewer side of the house, we're in pretty good shape financially. We've got some big capital projects coming up. Phase 5 of the WRF is a huge cost that we continue to look into. But at a 2.25% increase as recommended by the rate study, we looked at what was the opportunity of not implementing that this year. One thing we wanted to make sure in order to get an honest and a rate study that had integrity is that we didn't reduce anything. We looked at what it was expected to cost and then leave it up to the council to implement it as it sees fit. So we are able to recommend some, I guess, buffering, if you will, in implementing the sewer rate increase. Water, on the other hand, is a little different story. Sewer, as you know, the WRF has, we've issued utility debt, if you will, in order to pay for the WRF improvements. We've not had to do that in the water system until just recently. The water system, you saw us from Sergey's illustrations or his graphs, that we didn't have any debt. We were able to pay as we went. That became impossible to continue because we didn't have sufficient rates in order for us to pay for improvements as we went along. So we looked, as we always do, to look and determine if we may need to issue some debt in order to improve. We were able to get those 2 revolving loan funds, each for $4.3 million at different times. So that means we have to pay those loans back. We started paying, or we will start paying on the first loan. We will be constructing with the second loan this construction season and partially into next. There are some covenants that go along with those sorts of things, that you have to have a certain amount of money in reserve in order to pay for your debt. And if we looked at that at the 5% rate increase and determined that we couldn't not recommend that the full 5% be implemented on the water side for a couple of reasons. The main reason was we need that revenue in order to continue with even a modified capital improvement plan. Secondly, it is a conservation-based rate, and by not increasing the rate as the rate study warrants, that you might be encouraging non-conservation use of the resource. So with that, you'll see in the budget presentation, the sewer rate coming in for fiscal '21 at no increase, but water rates coming in at a 5% increase per the rate study. Thank you.
Okay, are we done with the, Tyler, you got anything else you want to add?
Mr. Mayor, that's all. We'd stand for any questions. I've got the staff recommendation on the screen.
Okay, well, with that, first thing I'm going to do is ask, if we got some public members here, if they've got any comments they'd like to make about our water and sewer rate study. Anybody out there would like to come up? Please come up and speak. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to questions from council. Gina, you look like you had a question. You have something?
No, I'm just, as I always am after a year-long effort by citizens, I'm impressed with the amount of work that our staff and our citizens did to go through this. And the numbers, after a while, I'll admit, I kind of glazed over, but I'm glad that we have done what we've done, and then the recommendation is to wait to implement for a year to just kind of give everybody a chance to breathe. I think that's a very good thing, at least on the sewer side.
Brandy.
I have a question, I think, for Tyler. Well, first of all, I really appreciate the Citizen Rate Committee that was formed to represent, a lot of diverse users. And it's also very encouraging that through that whole process, everyone agreed upon what you're proposing here today. So my question is for the non-residential rates. Will those entities, will their new bills clearly identify which category they are falling into? And will there be some explanation of what that category means?
Yeah, Brandy, we've identified, Ty Thompson is taking the lead on this for us, and he's on the line, and we've identified all of those businesses, so all of the commercial users, and we've gone through and looked at them each individually. And so the plan that we have put together will have that personalized outreach. At very least, they'll receive a letter from us, a communication stating, hey, this is the class and this is the impact. This is what this looks like for you. And then as we see some of the people that are more impacted, it will be a more personal outreach saying, hey, this is what's going on, heads up, here's what you might be able to do. Let's take a look at if you have irrigation tied into this, if you're fully taking advantage of our rebates for conservation devices, et cetera, to try and help ameliorate any of the impacts that are there. And then also just help with the understanding that it is coming into alignment. I was really impressed with, we had Eric from Safeway, the general manager of Safeway that was on the rate committee, and grocery stores stand to pay a little bit more with this, as does the hospital. And Peter Munt from the hospital was there, and they both were really great participatory members, had a lot of really good questions, but in the end recognized that it's fair to have what any entity pays reflect more what they contribute to the system. And there was that recognition that obviously, a hospital or a grocery store is contributing more than the law office or the insurance office. And so yeah, that outreach will certainly happen, and we will make sure that it's clear what that is, what's available, and what the appeals process looks like.
Great, thank you. One other question too, maybe it's for Sergey, I'm not sure, but you talked about using the historical information and about usage and so forth. I hate to even bring this up, but I'm curious, looking forward, since this starts in October, has there been any thought to what happens if a lot of these commercial entities that you're sort of projecting will have some high water usage are still in a COVID period of perhaps even being closed and not having much usage at all? Is that going to be hard to recover from for covering our costs?
Yeah, when we look at it, it's one of those interesting things. There was conversations that we had as the COVID thing came on, just with businesses that currently were in a situation where they might have been closed or unable to operate. And so, yeah, that is definitely one of the risks of a transition to more of a consumption base. While it's more equitable, you don't have those reliable base rates. It's certainly something we consider, Brandy. There's so much up in the air right now that it's really hard to take any definitive steps. I think that's one of the benefits to having the transition period, where we can take a look at the categorization, take a look at the revenues before we go to a complete cost of service. And so that'll really give us a year or two to let the dust settle a little bit. And hopefully in that period of time, the dust is settled with the COVID situation as well. And we can then make those adjustments that are appropriate.
And if I may add, Tyler, just for information purposes, when we develop the analysis, we incorporate fiscal policies to make sure there is some kind of reserve cushion available for emergencies. Now, COVID is one of those unknowns that has not happened ever or in a really, really long time. So we don't really know the basis. We've been following this with other utilities throughout the Pacific Northwest and as well as on the East Coast where the information available, but it's so early in terms of financial impacts for utilities just because of bi-monthly billing cycles, but some monthly cycles, different makeup of customer categories getting impacted differently. It's just too early to tell what can happen. But because the sewer utility is performing a little bit more healthy than the water utility, we do have more reserves in that utility. We can weather the storm, so to speak, since the non-residential class is not the only class on the system. So there is some cushion there. And if things significantly fall off the rails, 1 or 2 years down the line, the city can step in and reevaluate rates at that time. So again, it's not really set in stone. If things change significantly and the reserves are not sufficient at that time, you can revisit it definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else from councilors?
I just wanted to say I
Maureen.
appreciated the presentation because you took what I perceived to be a fairly complex issue and made it manageable. And while we all kind of get blurry-eyed sometimes with numbers, just the ability to kind of feel like I understood it, and that if you gave that presentation to us, I'm sure that the community will understand it as well.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
well,
I would like to make a motion to adopt the 2020 water and sewer utility rate study recommendations and direct staff to implement the recommendations in conjunction with the fiscal year 2021 budget.
Ann's got her hand up.
Second.
Okay. Okay, we got a motion by Brandy and a second by Ann to adopt a 2020 water sewer utility rate study recommendation and direct staff to implement the recommendations in conjunction with the FY 2021 budget. I'll start the roll with Sandra.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Brandy.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
And Ann.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tyler and Sandra. Good presentation about stuff that we need to talk to you periodically. So we'll see you guys next time. Okay, with that, item number 8, Coronavirus Recovery Fund Safety Payroll Reimbursement Property Tax Relief. Gary Reedner, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. What I have to talk to you about tonight is a program that has been proposed by the governor's office, comprising of approximately $200 million of coronavirus relief funds that have been put into a program that is to be split up between or among local government, counties and cities. And it's based upon population. It is a percentage or a proportion of that $200 million that would be made available to local government with a couple of caveats. The first caveat is that you would be able to use those funds for reimbursement to the local government for the costs of public health and public safety officers and public safety workers. So that is a allowed expense under the Treasury regulations for the Coronavirus Relief Fund and the CARES Act. So this program is in addition to the $887,000 that I reported to you about a month and a half to 2 months ago, is available for direct reimbursement for COVID-19 or coronavirus expenses the city has incurred, including costs of police officers and public health folks, firefighters as well. They made it even easier by saying that for administrative expediency that it was going to be presumed that any pay and benefits that were paid to these public safety personnel were going to be presumed that it was in pursuit of dealing with the coronavirus, so we would be able to get reimbursement for those expenses. This $200,000 program is a program that directly is in response to being able to get reimbursed for those public safety personnel, the expenses of those public safety personnel. But also there is a component of property tax relief to it. And that component is, and we are not sure what exactly that means. We've seen some relief funds program directives that have come out that talk about what is eligible, what it means to be eligible, so on and so forth, and exactly what the program is all about. The confusion comes in if it is, everybody can calculate up the amount of public safety personnel expenses, and that time period for those expenses is May 1st through December 30th. So they have to be expenses that were particular to that period of time in order to be reimbursed. So everybody understands how you can do that, and we've done the calculation, and actually we have sufficient expenses of public safety personnel that we will be able to utilize, at least at this point preliminarily, the full $887,000, $887,100. Didn't want to lose that $100 bill. And the whatever proportion of the $200 million the city would get, which has been estimated to be roughly 1.5 million, maybe a little more than that. The reason that I say roughly is because the $200 million program is proportionate to how many local government entities participate in it. So if a local government does not want to participate in it for whatever reason, then that amount of money that would have gone to them based on population would be available to everybody else remaining in the program. So all I can give you are estimates. The program timeline, well, let's get to the second part of the issue. The second part of the issue is because part of the program is to provide property tax relief, there is a protocol on how you would access these funds. Of course, they're coming right in. Our budget year runs, of course, from October 1st to September 30th. We're in the midst of putting the budget together. You will get your budget books this week, and we will have our budget workshops on the 21st and 22nd. So to make a property tax relief designation at this point is a little late in the game. It's not that the monies wouldn't be paid to backfill property tax reduction. Rather, what does that mean in subsequent years? Idaho law, as you know, you can only raise property taxes a maximum of 3% of the highest of the previous 3 budget years. So if council or any other local government reduces their levy by a certain percentage, say 1.5 million, what effect does that have on subsequent years? There are also questions about what are effects on URA districts. And these are all questions that are still hanging fire at this point. There's been some continuing discussions. We're being told, and let's get to the timeline. The timeline is that a participating government needs to submit a letter of intent by July 17th, so less than 2 weeks. And by the 24th of July, under the governor's timeline, we will be told what our amount of allocation is, because by that time, everybody will have either said they're in or they're out. After that, there is a process by which we would be paid that amount of money in October or November, replacing the taxes. How the taxes get relieved, not quite certain how that works. So directions that we've gotten just within the last week have been that the letter is non-binding. So we could submit a letter saying, yes, we'd like to participate. These are the amount of salaries and benefits that we would like to throw in, and we will provide some property tax relief for that. But again, it is non-binding. The reason it's not binding is because the governor's office then, or the Division of, or Department of Financial Management, then would let us know what the allocation is based on how many people are still in the game on the 24th. And if it's non-binding, you don't need to proceed with it. The drop dead date for us is when we submit our L2, which is our statement of property taxes we want the county to levy on the city's behalf. So we're fast approaching that time. We're asking for questions, or excuse me, asking for answers. I've been involved in this for about 2 months, have talked to the Association of Idaho Cities, talked to Alex Adams, who is the director of the Division or Department of Financial Management, reached out to my counterparts, city managers and administrators around the state. And what I'm finding is that nobody has a clear understanding of what this means. So tomorrow we are having a Zoom conference with AIC to see if we can sort through it. Now, that being said, we will not have another council meeting until after the 17th, which is when the letter of intent is scheduled to be submitted. Now, I know that AIC has discussed perhaps we want to see if we can move that date back somewhat. We can move it back somewhat, but it can't be too long because we have a budget to get done. And state law is really unforgiving about when you have to get your budget in. So what I'm asking for tonight is, as we continue to work through this, and Elisa Anderson, our grants manager, Mia Bautista, our city attorney, and I, and Sarah Banks, our finance director, are all looking at this and trying to make a determination of recommendation to the city council. What I'm asking for tonight is, because of the tight time frame, as we develop that, and if it is in fact, and we would have to determine for sure that the letter of intent is non-binding, so the council would be able to, the drop dead time for the council would be when the council would say, okay, we are going to take advantage of the program, not necessarily the non-binding letter of intent. So I'm looking for the council, or my recommendation is that the council allow the mayor to submit a non-binding letter of intent once we verify that it is in fact non-binding, and then the final decision on whether to participate would be brought back to the council in a full meeting with all of the facts.
Questions for Gary? Gina?
And I may be confusing city and county government right now, but I thought there was some sort of rule, and please to correct me, that we don't have the ability to bind a future council into something like this, right? So if we're agreeing to something of this nature now, it affects us a couple years out. How can we do this then?
Well, those are some of the quirks of it. First of all, you're not binding a future council, because what you may not do is you may not go into debt outside of your budget year without a vote of the people or with the finding of ordinary necessary expense by the district court. So what we're being told is that any reduction in property taxes would be for this 1 year, fiscal year 21, and then it would not carry over into the following budget year. Now, we're taking that at face value. We need more information about that.
Yeah, but it really kind of does though, right? Because it has an effect on what we then can levy.
What we're being told, Gina, is that it isn't even carried on the L2 as we know it. There's a mechanism by which property tax relief is given. We go into the fiscal year 22 budget at the same level that we currently are in fiscal year 2020. But again, we've not seen that in writing. We've got guidance, and what we're asking for is something that we can sink our teeth into, that we know that is what the intent is. Secondly, as you know, and I don't want to muddy the waters further, but the reason we're being so, we want to be fairly exact in what is being offered is because the legislature has made no bones about the fact that they're looking for property tax relief. And we want to make sure that there will be no repercussions from the legislature by taking advantage of this as well. So again, it all depends on it being non-binding, getting enough information to move ahead. I was very surprised that throughout the state, nobody has a handle on this at this stage of the game.
And the catch is, we have to let our intentions be known by the 17th of July, which is 11 days from now.
I will also note that the county prosecutor, specifically Latah County, has looked at this, and they believe that tying the COVID relief funding to property taxation is not allowed under the Treasury regulations. And they have a point. Whether or not that point is binding on the governor or not, what the prosecutors have asked is for the governor's office to request from the federal government a letter of guidance so we can be assured that what's being proposed is what is allowed under the Treasury regulations. The position, of course, is you could provide that relief without tying it to property tax relief. But again, the governor's office is offering this program.
That brings up a real question, though. How could you say it's not tied to property tax relief? What would you be doing then?
Well,
the money's going to go somewhere, so what would you be calling it?
You don't, in order to provide that funding to local government to reimburse for public safety, salary, and benefits, it's not necessary that it be tied to property tax relief. That is the program Governor Little is offering. There's nothing in the federal CARES Act that says that property tax relief is part of the program. So that's where, at least on a rudimentary level, that's one of the issues that the prosecutors have with it.
Okay. Maureen, you had something. Maureen, go ahead.
Unless I'm missing something, Gary, it doesn't seem like there's a downside to submitting a letter of intent on a non-binding letter of intent. Am I missing something?
No, and that's why the staff recommendation is to allow the mayor to do that. If he has sufficient information to know that it's non-binding, we calculate up the best deal possible, submit that, see if the funding comes through, and then the council could make that decision. So you're exactly right.
Brandy, do you have a question?
Yeah, so it was along those lines. So that's only if you can be assured that it will be non-binding.
Absolutely.
And you feel you will have an answer to that before you
Either
you
that,
submit it
or we
without it.
will reconvene,
Right, okay.
or we won't be sending a letter.
And then, if that issue that the county is concerned about ends up being true, I mean, that could be problematic because then you would have to repay it. Is that right? If you had used it in a non-compliant way and the Fed said you couldn't use that for property tax relief and now you have to pay it all back. Is that
Yeah, and as I understand the position is that the state of Idaho could pass that money down for reimbursement without it being tied to property taxes. So
okay.
I don't know the ramifications of that, Brandy, without doing a lot more research. I've read the county's letter and the legal research, and it appears that it's definitely got a point.
And does what the county decides to do, does that have any impact on what the city does? I mean, and are they the ones that have to figure out how to change this whole tax
No,
bill?
they will get direction from the State Tax Commission on that. There's actually parallel programs here. Of that $200 million, roughly $100 million goes for county reimbursement, and roughly $100 million goes toward city reimbursement. So they're being offered the same program.
Okay. And then I have one other question.
Go
So
ahead, Brent.
when you said you would submit in this letter the amount that you would be qualifying for or requesting, I mean, right now, we're thinking that our cut could be about 1.5 million, but that's dependent on how many other cities participate. So would the amount you're putting in the letter of intent be that 1.5, or do you just go for an amount that's even larger than that?
What I was told by Alex Adams was that approximately, and he's just throwing approximates out, but he said if everybody participated in the program, that the city of Moscow's allocation should be around 1.5 million. And my recommendation would be, since we don't know who's all going to participate, that we put reimbursement for as much salary and benefits as we can. If the allocation isn't big enough, that comes down, they'll cut us back to what it would be.
Yeah, proportionate to whatever it may be. Okay, well, how would the council like to move with this?
Well, Your Honor, I will make a motion.
Okay,
I move that we authorize the mayor to issue the non-binding letter of intent on or before the 17th of July, 2020, and to seek further direction from city council prior to further commitment to participate in the program.
I see Maureen's hand up. She seconds it. Okay, we have a motion by Gina and a second by Maureen to authorize the mayor to issue the non-binding letter of intent on or before July 17, 2020, and to seek further direction from the city council prior to the further commitment to participate in the program. I will start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
And Ann.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we will move on to item number 9, which is City of Moscow benefits proposed plan year August 1st, 2020 through July 31st, 2021. Gary, Reader, you got the floor again.
Thank you. I apologize for the size of this agenda, but, and we do have an executive
Doesn't matter, we
session
can be here
after
till
this.
midnight if that's what it takes.
Okay. This is something that I reached out to council, and the memo that I sent out to you is included in the packet. This has to do with the city's employee health care benefits. As I indicated in the memo, we have had a rate increase offer or mandate, if you will, from Regents Group, who carries employee health benefits for us. And that rate increase was 13.42%, representing almost $250,000 in increased premium for the upcoming fiscal year. Actually, the upcoming plan year. Our plan year runs from August 1st through July 31st of the following year. That's quite a large increase, so as usual, we look at ways to get that reduced. So we talked to Regents, looked at perhaps some plan amendments to be able to get a less intensive rate increase, and we identified a program by which they would do that. Just need to revisit a moment why the increase was as high as it was. The use of the health insurance benefits by employees or members of the group, employees and their dependents, has been rather large. There have been some incidents of health issues that have been expensive to combat. And what happens is the insurance company looks at the premiums taken in, the benefits paid out, and if one exceeds the other, if it's benefits paid out exceed premiums taken in, they need a rate increase to make that balance. So what you're seeing is the city's group's experience is increasing. So one of the reasons we talked about being self-insured here a couple of years back, which doesn't look at this point like that's going to be feasible because of that continuing experience. So we went back to Regents, and through the Murray Group, who is our health insurance consultant, met with Regents and identified a couple of ways we could reduce that increase from 13.42% to 5.01%. We looked at things like increasing deductibles, which, by the way, did not, until you get up in fairly large deductibles, the savings isn't that much. But there were two programs that they indicated would have a beneficial effect on the rate increase. And the first one was an upfront benefit of $400 for radiology and laboratory benefits. So if you go in, you get $400 worth of those services that isn't subject to deductible or copay. There was a concern that perhaps that would affect a woman's ability to get a mammogram, which has been mandated that has to be provided, and no, it does not affect that. So we cleared that right away. Maureen had a question about that. Thank you for that. Secondly was we have a maximum out-of-pocket, I think it's called out-of-pocket maximum annual. And that out-of-pocket maximum under our current program has been $2,300 for an individual and $4,600 for a family. $2,300 for an individual means if you ever have to pay deductible and copay exceeding $2,300, then insurance picks up 100% of any further expenses after that. So family, same thing for $4,600. That was a concern to Regents, and that was one of the main things that they offered to reduce the increase. So we settled on a $5,000 individual out-of-pocket maximum and a $10,000 in family out-of-pocket maximum. And that gave us that decrease from 13.42% to 5.01. Now, that exposes individuals and families to quite a bit more out-of-pocket if they have some adverse health conditions. So as part of that, we went back to Murray and retained their actuary to do some analysis for us. So we are also proposing that the council allow us to form a health reimbursement program, or HRA, health reimbursement account, wherein if an individual were to experience an increase, or maximum out-of-pocket over $3,000 per year, the city essentially would self-insure for that additional $2,000 before you reached the Regents' out-of-pocket maximum. Same thing for, $3,500, I spoke incorrectly. For a family, it would be double that, or $7,000 out-of-pocket maximum. So after that, then the city would self-insure for that $3,000. So the employee would be protected above $3,500 for an individual and above $7,000 for a family. Now, the cost of that program is much less than the cost of just re-upping the original insurance program that we have. So it's estimated that it would be about $65,000 we would have to hold in reserve on an annual basis. The experience could be up, it could be down, but that's how much money we would need to have in reserve if the actuarial data bears out. So that protects the individual, saves the city money, because the $250,000 that would have been the 13.42% increase, 257, I believe is the number, it would be reduced to below, I think it was about 180,000 without looking at my notes. So it's a savings on both sides. It seemed like the way to go. We are also proposing, we're not asking for a decision tonight, but we're also asking in the budget for an increase in the individual VEBA account, voluntary employee benefit account, from $350 to $500 to further help offset those increases. So with that, and the reason I sent this out, as I indicated in the memo, we have entered into this agreement with Regents because we are just, in fact, we only have another day of open enrollment where employees have to make a choice. So as I indicated in that memo, after getting responses from each of you individually, I would come to you and ask for ratification of this program, which is why I'm here tonight.
Questions for Gary?
No questions. I think all that negotiating with insurance plans and weighing all the different options and coming up with this was very impressive, and I think the best solution for the many employees of the city of Moscow. So.
And I want to thank the council too. Several great ideas came from the council that we were able to integrate into the program as well.
Well, every year, health benefits are always a challenge because they're always so ever-changing. And I think that is just the way life's going to be every single year. We don't know until we're there, so.
And then the added benefit too, that it manages to save a lot of taxpayer money at the same time from what the first thing that came to from the insurance provider, so.
Okay.
All right, well, I move to approve the adjustment to the benefits and related costs associated with those changes to the City of Moscow's employee benefit program.
Second.
Okay. Maureen, you had your hand up. Were you on the second? Sandra, if you were, Sandra, get it. Was there something you wanted to say? It must not have been. Okay. We got a motion by Brandy and a second by Sandra to approve the adjustment to benefits and related costs associated with those changes to the City of Moscow's employee benefit program. Maureen, I'll start with you.
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Tina.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
And Brandy.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the close of our normal agenda items. I would entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session per code, Idaho Code 74-206, 1C and F, and this meeting will not reconvene once that executive session is done.
So moved.
Gina made a motion, second.
Second.
Well, I'll give it to Sandra. All in favor, give me an aye.
Aye.
Okay, with that, it is 7:34.
Give me an A.